Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to this special town hall meeting about the upcoming aged care legislation. We really appreciate you taking the time to come along, the time out of your day. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the people of the Ngunnawal Nation, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We extend this respect to any First Nations people joining us here this afternoon. Since taking office, Senator Pocock has held 4 town halls every year, and this is the final event for 2024. The government's proposed changes to aged care are some of the biggest changes in 30 years. So the Senator thought it was important to dedicate his final town hall of 2024 to hearing from you about what you think about these laws. We have to make sure the government gets it right. For those of you who have been to David's other town halls, you will know he always asks you to submit your questions beforehand, but today we're going analogue. The Senator will be walking you through the proposed changes to aged care laws and will explain the feedback he's received from the community to date. He'll ask a few questions and ask for some audience votes, so please get ready to raise your hands and participate. Before we get to David, you will hear from Council on the Ageing about their work here in the ACT. And after the formal proceedings close, we'll be sticking around for afternoon tea, and there's some tea, coffee and biscuits available over there. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Jenny Mobbs and Kirsten Cross from COTA, who will provide a bit of housekeeping information and an introduction to the work that COTA does.
Thank you very much, and I too acknowledge the traditional owners on of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and to their emerging leaders. And welcome Senator Pocock to COTA ACT, the Hughes community. You could see that COTA's not very well known in the community, which is why we fill this hall nearly every month on different topics. I'm just going to do the housekeeping, then I'm going to hand over to Kirsten and Basil, who are just going to do a very brief introduction to their work that they do. They usually do a half-hour presentation, but we've squished it down to about 5 or 6 minutes today. Just housekeeping. The toilets are for men and women and disabled are out the front door here and to the left. We also, as I said, we run a lot of sessions here in the hall. In 2 weeks' time, we have the aged care government team coming back. So if you don't get all of your answers today, come back and harangue the team about your questions that you may have. We also, COTA every year for the ACT government runs the Positive Ageing Awards, and they are up on our website at the moment. And if you know someone who's done something wonderful in the ageing space, please nominate them. The awards are wonderful, and we have a big celebration to celebrate ageing in the ACT. I think that's about all I have to say today. Midweek Matters, if you have a look on our website, will be on the 13th of November. Starts at 1 o'clock, and the Federal Department of Ageing will be here that day. So I'm going to hand over to Kirsten now. She's going to do a very brief synopsis of what COTA tries to achieve every week.
Very brief. Thanks, Jenny. I'm wondering if we can have the slides of our quick presentation, please. Getting there? I can start talking while we wait for those to come. Good afternoon, everybody. As Jenny said, I'm Kirsten Cross. I'm the General Manager at Council on the Ageing. We are, and I just wanted to give a quick overview, there we go, of our services and what we do. So we've been around for over 50 years now. We were able to join our own organisation, but we work to improve the lives of older people in the ACT community and have done since 1973. We not only work with older people themselves, but also with their family, their friends, organisations, businesses, and any other parts of the community that have relevance in this space. We're inclusive and welcoming. Next slide, please. The two main arms, as you can see I'm really rushing, the two main arms of what we do are kind of representation and programs and services. So we have a role as the peak body for seniors in the ACT in promoting the interests of seniors to the territory government, as well as, more broadly in a policy sense, working on reference groups. Jenny is on about 1 million committees, and getting across the issues that are important to seniors in this space. But we also, and we're a bit unique among the COTAs around the country, we have a whole range of programs and services. So we do direct service delivery for many thousands of clients every year. One of those that we will focus on after I finish is our housing and ageing service, which plays particularly in this space and is a free service. And you're all welcome to come and meet the lovely Basil, who has a finite amount of resources, but a very generous heart. So next slide, please. I was going to have a clicker, that's all good. We also do outreach services. So you might have seen us in the libraries. We're out in all 4 of the major libraries every week. And we do a whole range of things, including, as Jenny mentioned, the Midweek Matters program, which is the once-a-month session here we have on topics of interest to older people. In a fortnight, we've got aged care reforms. We also do, I don't know, did anyone come to the ACT Seniors Expo last month? Yay. So we do that once a year now, because otherwise we would die. And so we had 4,000 people there last month. We also do concerts and awards, as Jenny mentioned, the Positive Ageing Awards. Next, please. Thank you. We do quite a lot of work and a lot that you might not imagine. So as I said, we kind of look at 25,000 instances of support every year. We look after the ACT Seniors card, so I'm sure most people in the room have an ACT Seniors card. And we also at the moment are grappling with the transition from Transport Canberra to the My Way Plus system. So that's an added joy to our lives at the moment, and also I guess an added complication for everybody. We do housing and ageing support, which Basil and I do. We do a whole lot of other programs and services, events and community connections. We're also the responsible for the Seniors Information Service in the ACT. So we're kind of like the information point of call for any issues that seniors might have. I think probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip the next 2 slides because I'm being quick, and basically talk about that. Yep, perfect. So we do look after the ACT Seniors card and the discount directory. So there are about 40 to 60,000 people in the ACT who have an ACT Seniors card, and we have an amazing team headed up by Raina, who does the hard copy and the online discount directory for seniors. So if you don't have a copy of that, please feel free to grab one before you leave. We have a table out the front. We also do a whole range of other publications. On the next slide. So we do news and information. So we do things like Jenny wrote the amazing Older Drivers Handbook recently, getting around Canberra, and you'll see our wall down the corridor is filled with brochures, a whole range of which are ours and also other organisations. But probably the most important service that we do that might be of interest to what we're talking about today is our housing and ageing service. And we've been doing this for more than a decade, very long time. And it's a one-on-one free appointment service where we can help to navigate with you your housing or ageing support requirements. And the lovely Basil does that 3 days a week, and you can come back as many times as you like. So what I might do is hand over to Basil, who can talk a little bit about the sort of stuff that we do in that space, and also what the key questions might be. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Kirsten and Jenny and Tash and David's crew. As Kirsten mentioned, I cover the housing and aging options portfolio for COTA ACT. And what that involves is talking to people about what their needs are. And I meet lots of people who, similar to me and my wife, discuss whether they're going to downsize or whether downsizing is into a smaller home or into a retirement village and so on. And the more difficult tasks where sometimes a relative, it may be a spouse, it may be a parent, has got to a point in life where they need to consider residential aged care. So I talk with people about all those needs and where they're at, and the pluses and minuses about those various options that are available to them. Prior to residential aged care, of course, we've got what is currently known as the Commonwealth Home Support Program and home care packages. And I spend a lot of time assisting people understand how to find out about availability of services for them, because that's one of the biggest areas that people fall down on. Just on Monday, I had someone come in and they thought they were pretty well over the system of getting help. And then at the end of it, this person said to me, I didn't know that it was that easy on the computer to find out where availability was. And so it's a case of understanding what's available and explaining it in simple terms. So my time is spent trying to simplify a lot of the issues that are present and coming up. I've been reading the information, the Commonwealth Home Support Program and home care packages are going to be known as support at home. And the charging systems are going to be changing, the costs. And that is one of the very important areas for many of us. For self-funded retirees at the present time, if they were offered a level 1 or level 2 home care package, they'd probably be saying, is this financially worthwhile? And this is particularly important for the self-funded retirees. And so they go through the dilemma of where they're going to stand with that sort of thing. I'm sure David will, and next week the aged care people will explain more of the changes that are coming in that area. We're going back to the future in as far as residential aged care costs are going to be concerned. We had a wonderful thing called a refundable accommodation deposit. In the old days, we had bonds, and the organizations got to retain a portion of those bonds as time went on. Well, that is possibly what's going to happen in the not too distant future. So all things to be looked at and explained. And the point is to get that explanation in simple language, and I hope for the most part that I achieved that. So that gives you a broad picture, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Basil, Kirsten and Jenny. I'm not really sure where Canberra would be without COTA, to be honest. Thank you so much for all your work. If anybody would like some more information about COTA and what they do, please come and find one of these three wonderful people at the end. So now it's time to hear from Senator David Pocock about the changes to the aged care laws that the government is proposing. David will talk for around 20 minutes or so, and then we will move to a Q&A session so that you can ask any questions you have or give your opinion on the new laws. I will have a roving microphone at that point, so I'll ask you, if it's okay, just to keep your comments and questions to around 45 seconds or less. I apologise in advance if I take the microphone back off somebody, but we do need to make sure that we get to as many people as possible. So these laws are going to affect all of Canberra, so David wants to hear from as many people as he can. Introducing Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, Tash. And thank you to Jenny, Kirsten and Basil for all the great work you're doing for hosting us here today. And thank you all so much for giving up your time to come and listen to me explain parts of what are in this bill, but really to give me your opinion, what you think about it, the things that you would like me to be focusing on. I think it's about 500-page bill, Rory. There's a lot of detail in it. It's hugely consequential, and so really trying to find out, like, these are the most important things to ensure that we can push the government to get right. You all know that the government's proposing big changes. The thing to note at the start is that this will not affect anyone who's currently on a home care package or is currently in residential aged care. Those arrangements will continue. So this is for going forward. If you're wanting to get a home care package or to go into residential aged care, there'll be a new system. There's a lot of changes, and the other thing I wanted to say is that I know there's a lot of people who have issues with retirement villages. A separate issue. We're keen to hear about them, but we're not going to be touching on them in this discussion today. Also acknowledge we have a representative from the Department of Health and Aged Care, Ms. Julie Atkinson, who will hopefully be able to, right up the back, who will hopefully be able to help with some of the more detailed questions. And I'm hoping Ms. Atkinson can hang around for a few minutes afterwards if people do have questions they want to ask. When it comes to aged care, I guess there's a couple of things that I think about in trying to guide how we engage with this, and I guess the first one is the broader question of you as Australians. How should we be thinking about and treating older Australians who have made everything that we enjoy possible? You know, everything that's we currently enjoy in Australia is due to the generations that went before us. And so what does ensuring that as people age, they are treated with dignity, they are able to actually continue to live their lives and be valued members of society. The other thing is the Aged Care Royal Commission findings. I think it was so extensive. 148 recommendations, 23 public hearings over almost 100 days, 641 witnesses, 10,000 submissions, with people really putting forward some pretty shocking experiences of abuse of themselves or of loved ones. And clearly this should give us a bit of a blueprint of where we need to be heading, and we'll acknowledge it's been a pretty slow road delivering on a much bigger vision. I picked out a quote from the Royal Commission because I think it sums up this concept perfectly, from Aileen Kramer. Oh, sure, I can read it. I don't feel old, I don't want to behave old, but I realise that the spirit has a house to live in, and that house is our body, so we have to look after that. And that's what aged care is about, in a way. We have to look after that house so that our spirit can enjoy life. Mine does. So clearly aged care should be more than just clinical care. It should be about enabling life. So today I'm going to focus quite a bit on home care rather than residential care. What I'm hearing is that that's where people have more questions. And I know almost everyone's first preference is to be able to age at home for as long as possible. And as a society, we need to be ensuring that we have systems in place that allows that. Residential care is clearly an important safety net, sometimes unavoidable, but we know it's a last resort, and we know it's something that a lot of people would like to avoid if they can. So let's get into the bill. As I said, there's a huge range of changes, but in essence, I think it aims to do three things. One, ensure that aged care services can keep their doors open, provide more options for people to stay at home for as long as they want, and provide people some fundamental rights while they're receiving aged care. Why is it necessary? As you know, we have an aging population, and that's happening at a time where providers are already reporting that they're struggling to keep up with demand. If you look at the ACT, we don't have a single residential facility in the Gungahlin area. It's almost 100,000 people up there now. So clearly, we've dropped the ball a bit in actually planning for the future. And I think this is an attempt to have a real step change and address some of the failings in that, not just make it a one-off cash injection, but actually try and address the challenges in the system. We know that some of the current standards aren't cutting it, from the level of care people receive to the food to some of the financial arrangements. Let's jump to the framework. Yep. So the bill outlines over 20 or so what the government is calling rights for people receiving aged care, whether that's at home or care in a residential facility. It includes a right to exercise choice that makes decisions about your own personal possessions while you're in aged care, a right to take personal risks, including a right to intimate relationships, a right to privacy, a right to be treated with dignity and respect. I think this is a really interesting one, a thing I've heard a lot from people about, a right to stay connected with your pet. And it's quite a big statement of rights. It's quite comprehensive if you look through them. But my question is, how do we ensure that these rights are actually upheld? Because these aren't legally enforceable rights. And so then the question has to be, well, what's the mechanism? If you're telling us you're giving us these rights, how do we ensure that we get them? And they're not just words on a page. And so that's something that Rory on my team has been looking at. What are the mechanisms for actually ensuring that we have a robust process to enforce those rights? And I think it raises a whole range of questions about enforceability. Like, does a right to stay connected to a pet guarantee that you can take your dog with you into an aged care facility, or is it just up to the facility? Does a right to choice mean that in residential care that provider has to have enough staff on a shift for you to have a shower at 10 a.m. if that's when you like to have a shower in the morning? I think these are all questions that really need to be worked out when they're talking about rights. What does that actually translate to? We'll move on to home care packages. As Basil mentioned, they will be rebranded, Support at Home. Government seem to love rebranding things. I'm sure everyone knows a home care package is a small budget that you get to use to allow you to stay at home, to access services that allow that. There'll be a new structure with 8 levels of packages that are tailored to people's needs, and the top package will be around $78,000 per year. The big thing that the government is promising with this, or saying what will happen, is significantly lower waiting times for a package. Currently it's up to 15 months for a level 4 package, which is just ridiculous and far too long. And we hear stories of people applying for packages and in that 15 months having a fall, and it means that they're not actually able to age at home. The plan is to get all waiting lists down to 3 months. 3 months by mid-2027. Yes, got that right. So they're giving themselves a few years to do it. We're going to talk about ACATs or? Okay, cool. I'll leave that then. The other one is around financial contributions. So this is something that's been talked a lot about. The major parties have, I think, consulted widely and essentially landed at a spot where they both think that they've sort of struck a deal on this. So everyone currently pays fees to access a home care package. So this is not new, but there are 2 changes to be aware of. Fees will now be based on the services people actually receive, rather than just a flat fee that you have to pay even if you don't receive any services. It obviously makes no sense to pay for pay a fee if you're up in Queensland visiting family for a month or two. So I think that is a good thing. You also need to contribute a bit more to services if you can afford it, which is based on your income and assets. There's a table up here. You can have a look at. One of the things obviously note is that no one will pay for clinical care. I think that's something that shouldn't be skimped on and is incredibly important. There's obviously the different ranges, and then I think really critically there's a lifetime cap of 130,000. So if you're a self-funded retiree, you hit that cap, and that's as much as you will pay. Let's go to residential. So residential care. So Rory has kindly summarised these changes. The key takeaway, I think, is that it's complicated. But in essence, people will need to pay more towards residential aged care if they can afford to. There will also be the safety net for those who have very little income and assets. And I believe there will be incentives for providers to take on residents in those circumstances, potentially. Clearly, we don't want a system where only the wealthier Australians have access to this important safety net. So I think that's something I'm keen to look into a bit further about the exact details of that. I think the big change that people may be interested in is to the accommodation charges, and Basil touched on this. If you pay a refundable accommodation deposit, providers will now be able to keep 2% of it each year for up to 5 years. So you can get up to 10% of that deposit. And if you pay the DAP, then the big change is that it's going to be indexed twice yearly going forward in line with the age pension. One of the things I'm really keen to look at with this is that we're being told that this is to allow residential aged care to invest in facilities and infrastructure and upgrades, which I think is a good thing, but there's actually nothing in the bill that says that they need to be using that money for that. So I think that's an important piece of this. Yes, we want them investing in better facilities, but we've got to make sure they're doing that and not just adding that to their profit margin or using that to cross-subsidise something else. So having a look at the bill so far, my team and I have some questions, and the big one is the 3 months. I think it's a great aspiration, but will it be achieved? And the big question for me is, before you get approved and then 3 months later you'll hopefully get your package, you obviously have to have an ACAT, and that can take months, up to a year here in the ACT. And this is something that has been actually really troubling to see just how far behind we are here in the ACT, and would really like to thank Ms. Atkinson for the work that she's been doing on this. This is an ACT government responsibility. They get funding from the Commonwealth, and we haven't seen them fill the places to actually speed this up. Been pushing them hard over the last 6 months, year, and we've seen that time, I think, halve for... The backlog's going down. They're making good progress. Still not good enough, but we'll certainly keep pushing them on them. So this is a big question through this whole process. You can promise people 3 months, but the thing they're not talking about is that to get to that 3 months, you have to go through this other process, which could take up to a year. So we just need a bit more clarity around that. I spoke about the enforceability of rights. I think this is a really big one. What is the complaints process? How transparent is it? How do you actually enforce these things? Which I think most people would read and say, yeah, that's a great starting point. I really like those rights, but I actually want them. I just don't want them to sit on this piece of paper. And then the third one, transparency around how funding is spent. I think this is a big one that's been ongoing with really anything where we're seeing Commonwealth contributions, people putting their own money in, and very little transparency around where that's being spent, how much of it is going to improving infrastructure, how much of it is going to things like food and services, and what are the profit margins that people are making. I mean, these are so far in let's get to some of those stats. What we've been hearing so far from conversations, and we also have surveyed 100 people, is that 78 either said that they felt it was right for people to pay more for aged care if they could afford to, and recognise that the most important thing is for older Canberrans to receive quality care. And if that's what it's going to take to make the system sustainable, then people are largely on board. But I think the big thing is, if people are going to pay, they expect that the care is actually going to be better, a higher standard. One of the things that was interesting is that 58% of people said that they weren't confident that the aged care system would be able to meet their needs when they needed it. And I think that's very worrying, and I think points to some of the big challenges we face in actually getting this right and starting to rebuild trust in a system that is just so important for us as a country. 51% of people also said that they didn't think aged care providers had the best interests of senior Australians at heart, and that's pretty shocking. Probably no surprise, anyone who paid attention to the Aged Care Royal Commission. And I think, again, a real reminder that we do need the government to play a role in this sector in ensuring that we're seeing standards raised, that we're actually seeing rights being enforced, and people looked after. Before we launch into questions, I just wanted to do a bit of a straw poll on a few questions. If you're happy to raise your hand if after seeing this information you think the system is too complicated. If you think that people who can afford to should pay a bit more for aged care services. I'm hearing a lot of ifs. You think that people should have a legal right to receive aged care? You think that you should be able to bring a pet with you into any aged care facility? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you think the government should be held to strict timeframes around granting people aged care packages? Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. I mean, just before we jump into questions, one of the things that has stuck out to me a bit, and is that this reform is not this sort of guarantee to aged care, but is really a capped scheme at 300,000 places. The government assures me that if we get 300,000, they'll, budget more. But I've got concerns about the way that we're treating this, as if we think that this is important for all Australians as they age to have access to these things, then I think it should be this is the expectation, this is what's available, and we'll pay for it as a country. And if it means, getting a bit of revenue from the gas that we are happy to give away for free, then we'll do that. Yeah, it's. I think there's a bit more work to do there. But with that, we'll jump into questions. So Natasha has a microphone. If you want to put your hand up, we'll.
I'm just going to take a little bit longer because I'm going to make sure we wipe it each time we swap people.
Senator, you've already touched on the rights and protections for the aged, frail and disabled. We're placed in the hands of private providers, and you saw the show of hands. Not all of us are convinced that they put us first. But the legislation has gutted the rights by making them legally unenforceable, and it has dropped the initial proposals of fines and jail terms for those who grossly fail to meet their duties to their clients in favour of more modest corporate fees. And it's neutered the only recourse that aged clients have by providing the Complaints Commissioner with inadequate powers and independence. Now, both Royal Commissions on aged care and disability said that the existing protections and reliance on civil law, which is again referred to in this legislation, were totally inadequate. This is not in accordance with community standards elsewhere. As a company director, I knew that I had a statutory duty to ensure that I didn't breach OH&S standards. And if I failed in that duty as a director, then I was liable to face a jail sentence of up to 20 years. Why are we, the aged and disabled, the frail, why are we less valuable than the employees of companies? And can you do something about that? Can you ensure that the Complaints Commissioner as well has powers at least equivalent to the new Australian Administrative Review Tribunal, which can actually intervene to replace decisions made by government decision makers? These decisions are being made by private decision makers who are being paid to accept government responsibilities.
It's a great question. As I touched on, I've got a real concern about this. It does seem like we're accepting a lower standard and not holding people to account for failures in governance and actually delivering services that they're being paid to deliver. Certainly something that I'll be pushing, through the Senate committee process and with amendments. I'm not totally sure how they landed on this. Yeah, my understanding is it was a deal between the coalition and the government to sort of water that part down, which again, I think if you're being paid to deliver a service, and you should have the same sort of responsibilities as other. So certainly something that I'll continue to push.
Senator, I'd just like clarification and confirmation of a couple of aspects I just heard. The first one that you talked about, that it won't affect those on home care packages. Is that absolute, meaning they will stay with their home care packages, or is there an option to transition to the new system? And if so, how might that transition be conducted? And the second thing, and I might just reveal both of them, the chart that talked about aged care, that self-funded retirees paying 50% or 80% of one category or another, where does that come from? Because having tried to trawl through the Act itself, all I could see was much more complicated things like percentages of some number that came out of your income tests and another number that came from your asset tests, and somehow or other that led somewhere, which you could only know by doing it on the day. Were those just generalisations, or are they now the rules?
Sure. Thank you. So on the first one, Ms. Atkinson, please correct me. My understanding is that if you're on a home care package. It stays the same. If you need a reassessment, you'll be in the new system.
Hi everyone. So if you have a home care package and you're already receiving care with your home care package, you won't be subject to the changes to consumer contributions. So you will continue to have the same arrangements for the contributions that you make as what you have today. You will continue to receive the same funding amount as what you have today. If you need to be reassessed because your package isn't enough for what you need and ongoing, you'll be reassessed into the Support at Home program and potentially also be able to then receive the higher amount of funding that's available in that program, depending on your needs.
And Ms. Atkinson, on the second question about the slide, I believe the department put the slide together. Are you happy to? So the question was, is this sort of what it actually looks like?
Okay. Is this what it actually looks like? So this is where we are today and what appears in the bill. And those categories there of clinical care, independence and everyday living, those each have a list. So that service list that we talked about earlier. That service list is at the moment out for consultation. So encourage you all to participate in that process. And that's kind of where we are up to right now, yeah.
So those are the ranges of the minimum and the maximum, depending on, the list.
By popular demand.
I think I can see what's happened here when I was running through the Act itself and looking at the formulae and whatever else. They probably applied to somebody whose income and assets were being assessed and had not hit the top level. But if they hit the top level, then I'm hearing you say that would be 50% of this or 80% of that. Yeah, thank you. That clarifies it nicely.
Hi, my question is something that's an issue now, and I'm sure it's not going to improve, and that's actually staffing, because there's people on home care packages now who cannot get what they are supposed to be getting because there aren't the staffing. So when I look at this, there's no mention, and I can't find any mention of what's going to be done to try and increase the staffing, particularly for the at-home. There seems to have been a lot done with residential care, with visas for people coming in. I know where my dad is, they've had a whole heap of Filipino people brought in, and the place that he's with provided housing for those visas people as they transitioned into working, so they didn't have to look for accommodation when they arrived in Australia. But it's a not-for-profit organisation, and I'm sure the for-profits aren't putting in the effort that's needed to actually get increased staffing. And the at-home is very problematic. When you've got people who need assistance with showering and medication, and so they need someone to turn up at midday for their medication, but there's a phone call at 10 a.m. to say no one's available today.
Yeah, I think staffing's a huge issue in workforce planning, and I think again something that the previous government dropped the ball on. There wasn't actually an eye to the future and saying what sort of workforce will we need. I know the government has been doing work on that, but I might ask for if there's anything to add from the department.
Thanks, Senator. So look, it is a great point, and you're right to say the government's put a lot of effort into the residential care sector, so introducing mandatory care minutes and 24/7 attendance of registered nurses on site. As you said, it's a different situation in home care. So you wouldn't use those same metrics, right? So you wouldn't have a nurse 24/7. What we are doing in home care through the Support at Home program is we are introducing a situation where providers are paid based on what they deliver. So hour by hour, if the demand is there, then that's what they'll get paid for. And that's a motivator for them to hire the right amount of people to access the funds. The other thing that the government has progressed, and it goes across both residential care and home care, is that uplift to wages through the decision from the Fair Work Commission, which we have seen has had some impact. But ensuring that uplift is fully funded by the government, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, before the wage decision, I certainly heard a lot of people saying that people had been moving from aged care into things like NDIS because better pay, and so I think pay is definitely part of it. But having an actual strategy is pretty critical to ensure we have the people we need.
Right. Stand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, I guess it's been not surprising. I guess I don't know why we should be surprised, but AC doesn't even have a nurse strategy. So I think we're seeing all these things that all of us are feeling the effects of, but we're not seeing governments actually say, okay, well, let's have a strategy when it comes to nurses or midwives, and let's ensure that we have enough. And I think here in the ACT, we feel the lack of medical professionals across the board pretty acutely. So something I'll keep pushing both ACT Gov on and federal government.
Thank you, David, for mentioning pets. Many thousands of older Australians own a pet, and pets are family. For some people, they may be their only family, and at a lonelier time for us, they give us non-judgmental and comforting companionship all day and every day. The new legislation helpfully recognises the importance of pets in the lives of older Australians, but the service list for support at home does not. When we face a critical medical need, we may need extra help to care for our pet. So pet care assistance needs to be an allowable service. It can be done at little or no expense. I'm asking two things, please. Could you please work to have pet care assistance included as an everyday living service? And could you please require that ACAT teams ask whether there is a pet in the household, the care needs for that pet, and record that information for care teams? After all, if a care team is to properly support the person and understand their needs, they need to actually have information about the presence of a pet in the household. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think some great points. That they can add so much to our lives, and it seems like we should be ensuring that can happen wherever possible. I've actually had a discussion with the minister about this and what it could potentially look like, so we can follow up on those things and keep pushing to make sure that it's reflected in the legislation.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Where are you, Mohammed?
This is Muhammad Ali from Helping ACT. Thank you very much for passing on some valuable information, and I really commend Kota on holding this event here, and especially Basil, who is not only at Kota but also a very prominent volunteer of Helping ACT. Thank you very much, Mr. Basil. There are two questions. One is basically a concern, and I would like some answer to it. And the second one is certainly another question, important one. The first one is that you mentioned Gangalan area. And Gangalan area has no aged care facility at this point in time, and the population is certainly increasing day by day in that area. Only I was in Taylor the other day, and I just saw that how many people. Basically, the question is that even though the percentage of subcontinental and Middle Eastern people is low in Canberra, yet they have elders, and they have got a very different model, which is their tradition for centuries, that they wish to keep their elders at home. So basically my question is that, is there any way that you can include this concern and comment so that something could be done? We have been pressing on the ACT government and federal government to think about it, that whether home-based care will be admissible and will be subsidized or paid by the government for our parents. Second thing is that we work very closely with the Early Morning Centre, and dental care is one of the worst status at the moment, including homeless and as well as aged care. So can anything be done, please, 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 in this area as well? Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed, and thanks for all the great work that you do. I mean, on the first one, I think you're right. This is something that's been raised with me a number of times, looking at culturally appropriate aged care. I assume that home care packages can be used like that. Has this been part of consideration?
So it's a great question, and that kind of crossover between when does it become a residential care facility, at which point it would be a facility regulated by the Commission as a facility, versus, and I think what you're suggesting is something more like having a group of people pool their funding, or like people who are living close together. So that kind of arrangement, we don't have that in the program at the moment. It is a really interesting idea, and it's something that from a policy point of view, it's an innovation that we're interested in kind of looking more closely at. So it's not in the plan right now, but it is something that some of my colleagues are looking at, and looking at what is done overseas, because there's potentially a pathway there.
Thank you. And then on dental, we know how important dental health is for people's health, and I think for a country as wealthy as Australia, it should be something that is accessible and affordable. Increasingly, people are not able to access it or afford it, and are putting it in a cost of living crisis. It's a thing that you just kick down the road or just don't attend to, and it really comes down to priorities and budgets. And so there's a bunch of people on the crossbench who are pushing the government to actually, like I said earlier, get a bit more for our gas and other resources that we give to multinationals basically for free in many instances, to actually fund things that will make Australians' lives better right now. So no, there's no solution on the horizon, but certainly something we're pushing.
Thanks, David. My name's Helen Sutherland. I'm from the Vintage Reds organisation of Canberra in the region. I don't know nothing about it.
It's on, yeah.
It's on. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so my name's Helen Sutherland, and I am here on behalf of the Vintage Reds of Canberra and the region. One of the things and we've done quite a bit of work on looking at the Royal Commission's report, which we all found quite very disgusting, really. I wanted to get back to this point of workforce planning. Now, we have known for years and years and years that the aged, us baby boomers were coming through like a damn juggernaut, and there has been absolutely really very little in the way of strategic workforce planning in any area, really, whether it's health, whether it's aged care, disability, mental health. And all of a sudden it sort of becomes a bit of a crisis, and people are wondering, oh my God, what's going on? And what's going on, it's no point blaming the previous government or whatever. We've got to go back 40 years if we want to place blame anywhere. It's just a terrible lack of it. The other thing I wanted to say is that I studied health services planning and policies about 40 years ago in England, and there were 3 areas that they just blithely referred to as the Cinderella areas, and one was aged care, one was mental health, and one was disability services. And I don't think we can say anything much has changed here, at least in that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I despair at times looking at the short-term sort of nature of politics, where everything's aimed at the next election rather than lifting our gaze and saying, what are the big challenges that are coming down the track? So I think it's part of it's our system. 3-year terms are far too short, but I think it's also expecting more of politicians to actually be planning, and I think actually valuing our institutions. That is something that we need to stop doing, is really knocking the public service or other institutions who are set up to be the constant that is looking at these things. Governments come and go, but you at least have institutions that are doing this work and doing the forward planning. And I think the number of things that come up where it's like someone will say, oh, that was defunded in 2014. Tony Abbott defunded that, and so we don't have any good data when it comes to health workforce or whatever it might be. And so I think there's a bit of a shift in our thinking about investment in things that are good for the long term, and we may not see the benefit now, but are really important.
I just have a quick question. How do these changes affect people on the Commonwealth Home Support Programme, which is the one before? How do these changes affect people on the Commonwealth Home Support Programme?
Do you want to?
So the Commonwealth Home Support Program will remain in place as it is today until at least 2027. So the government's made a decision to introduce Support at Home in place of the Home Care Packages program first, and then to phase that introduction. It's risk management, I suppose, in implementation planning. So for CHSP, it will be subject to the new Act, and that will be new. So all of the rights that are attendant under the Act and the regulatory standards and quality indicators, those lifts will apply to CHSP providers, but the other changes won't flow through until later.
Hi, I'm Arthur Skimmon. Just wanted to make one point on aged care, is the communications. Unless we get the communications right in the first instance and be flexible enough to keep them right. I've had an incident where I was the advocate for a person who'd had a series of strokes and was in high care and didn't seem like getting out of that high care stroke situation. So the individual offered up the package, a level 4 package. So that was offered up because she didn't think she was coming out. Well, she did come out, but the package was gone. So we gave up, and the only one that came to the party was DVA. And DVA started to backfill on parts of the package. But these communications are the most important thing, and what your team's doing, I'm grateful.
Thank you. I think that's a really good point. Will anything change in terms of people's interaction with the system?
Yeah, look, I think just constant improvement. It's always a factor to make sure that people have the right information at the right time. So it's a point well made. It's not subject to the bill. It's just something we are always looking at.
I'm Fiona. Before I ask my question, I just want to make a comment. Culturally appropriate care isn't interesting, it's essential. Now, my question has to do with the complaints mechanism and people's access to it, because at the moment there are nominally systems for making complaints in place, but actually being able to make a complaint is often kind of like providers are gatekeepers, and there are often, or I have heard stories where there are often quite brutal repercussions for people who do make complaints, like their providers can retaliate if they can get to make a complaint in the first place. So a mechanism needs improvement, as our first person said, but accessibility to that mechanism is really important.
Agreed. I mean, that's really worrying to hear. And as I said, I think for me, this is a real focus in this bill, is how do we have that mechanism set up where you can have an avenue to enforce rights if you're don't feel like you're getting them, but yeah, there should be no repercussions for raising concerns.
Here, and then we're going to come up the front there.
David, I have three major concerns regarding the new aged care bill. The first is the bill is still hanging on to the rationing of aged care places. Under the current system, home care packages and residential aged care places are rationed. That's why there's such a long wait for high-level home care packages. I believe the system needs to move to an entitlement system. So once you are approved to receive the service, as long as you can access and get that service, you should be able to get it straight away and not have to wait. Medicare is an entitlement system, so should aged care. The second concern is the home care funding. The increase to 8 levels is certainly very welcome. However, why has it been limited to 8 levels? Why hasn't it been increased so that the maximum level is the equivalent to what you would be able to get for home care under the ANAC residential aged care funding system? There is absolutely no reason why home care shouldn't be funded at the same level as residential aged care, less those components of the ANAC system that are devoted simply to the issue to do with residential aged care. And the third concern is residential aged care. Clause 10 of the aged care bill determines where funded aged care services are delivered. And it describes in terms of residential aged care. But subclause 10.4 specifies that a residential home care for the purposes of the bill does not include a retirement village. It should.
Thank you. I mean, I think on your first two, anyone who's worked in the public service around government, it seems like all roads lead to Treasury. And this is an argument I made at one of the hearings. Why are we capping something if we say this is a good idea, this is something that should be available to Australians as they get older? Why are we saying this is a capped scheme? It doesn't make sense to me. Again, I think it's a budget decision, which seems like the wrong way to do things. We don't cap Medicare, as you made the point well. And then on the 8 levels, I'm not sure why not more. We can look into that and ask some questions. And then on residential aged care, I think we can also look into that, but potentially another discussion.
I wanted to just ask if the legislation. Sorry, I wanted to ask whether the legislation looks at service providers and the service providers providing a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service rather than a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday service, which can often happen, and the people don't turn up at the weekends and so forth. So I don't know what happens with service providers when they don't answer the phones, etc., whether there's going to be some follow-up of service providers and some rating system that actually really works to look at the service that they're promising and not providing.
I'm not actually sure, to be honest, but
okay.
Ms. Atkinson, do you? I don't imagine it makes them 24-hour, but
yeah, I suppose I think the question you're asking is what happens if the provider doesn't show up when they said that they would. So under the Current Act, there are protections there, and as the lady was saying before, the first place you would go is to talk to your provider, and obviously we wouldn't be happy at all if there was a reaction from a provider that was not acceptable. Sure. And so if you can't resolve with your provider, what we have got now is a new complaints commissioner. And so that's a new role that's been introduced so that older people and their families can go straight to a complaints commissioner with a complaint. So that's an extra level of protection there. And it applies now today under the current Act, and it will do under the new Act. Yep.
I'd like to ask you about disability in aged care, because if you become disabled through an accident, for example, a spinal cord injury at age 64, you'll get into the NDIS. At age on your 65th birthday, that disappears. And so you have to rely on aged care. And the aged care system is designed for the frail aged, not for people with disabilities. The Royal Commission recognised this, and in their recommendation 72 said that there should be equivalent support in aged care to that received by people in the NDIS for the same level of disability. Now that's perhaps a little bit too much to expect, because but it would be very nice if that could happen. But the problem is that the current bill and the regulations have just not addressed this problem. Disability is not specifically addressed in the Aged Care Act, and in fact the Department of Aged Care has been very reluctant or just to recognise the word disability if they've just not addressed it one little bit. And the guidelines, the draft guidelines for access to these higher level packages talk about cognitive and physical issues at a high level to get into the top package. Whether and people with a physical disability may have physical issues, but not cognitive issues, and this is just something that really must be addressed.
It should be on need and not on. Sorry, I'd just like to add to that. I think that when you're talking about help for people who are over 65, they don't get it if they're over 65. If they were 64, they do. Now, that we should not be compensated on age. It should be on needs. It should be should work out, have a package which is suitable for the needs of the person, not the fact that they're turning 65.
Thank you for raising this. It's just an arbitrary cut-off. It doesn't make sense to me. Makes an enormous difference. You look at what's available through the NDIS versus if you're over 65, what your options are. Huge disparity. Something I've raised with Minister Shorten directly. There's no appetite from either major party to change this. So I guess the focus has to be, how do we get better support? I guess through the aged care system. But again, it's not, as you're raising, it's not sort of specifically designed to deal with people with a disability. And so you're navigating a system that's not really designed for that. I think, yeah, it's a big challenge. I don't know if there's anything to add, Raw. Yeah, and I think part of it's an awareness thing for Australians to know. Certainly not something I knew about before I became a senator, that there was this cut-off, and there's people who, as you said, turn 65 and something happens to them and they're just ineligible for this scheme that we talk so much about. I think the more Australians that are aware of this, I think the more people would be saying, well, hang on, this makes no sense. It should be, if you're an Australian, you should have access to the NDIS based on your needs, not based on your age.
But it could still be organised in aged care.
could be. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So it could be. It could be. We can chase that up.
And it's
Okay.
a breach of our obligations under the Convention of the Rights of People with Disabilities, and there is a case before the UN right now on that issue.
Right. Okay. Check
Okay.
that out. Thank you.
Thanks, David. John Lamb here.
Hey, John.
I want to take a slightly different direction here, not quite specifically on the Act. Firstly, we are the juggernaut of baby boomers, and as such, we're the most spoilt and lucky generation there's been. We were able to buy our own homes, we got free university, all those different sorts of things. Some may have struggled here and there, but by comparison with most, we were very lucky. And we are going to be a juggernaut where there's less people to look after us as we become a majority in the future. And I'm a little embarrassed, in a sense, to sit here with the destruction and the light that's going on around the world, particularly the genocide in Gaza, and worry too much about our concerns. But I would like to have a little more emphasis on putting back the responsibility and the opportunity to, as you started with the quote from Eileen Kramer, so we should be looking after our bodies. And I would like to ask you and to see more emphasis on that idea of staying fit and well. You know, we see that war and illness, they say, are the most profitable businesses, and therefore we begin to understand things. In Canberra here, we have a lot of facilities, but rather than spending the emphasis on a new stadium, to get that money going into encouraging people to be more involved. To go to the AIS to get there costs a lot of money. There's a lot of things that can be done that I'd like to seek your support on. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a great point. There's such a lack of investment in preventative health and facilities to help people get active. You look at things like hydrotherapy, the lack of facilities in Canberra is certainly something I hear a lot about. We're at 2024, it seems like we should be focusing on these things that actually get people active, build a sense of community. Loneliness is becoming a huge issue in society, and as you said, inactivity is becoming a huge issue. So there's ways to solve both of those things. Certainly something that I've been pushing the ACT government on is to have better plans when it comes to community sporting infrastructure, things like hydrotherapy pools. But yeah, good point.
A technical question on the interplay between DVA services and the HCP and the future program. Currently, DVA Veterans Home Care and Community Nursing programs complement the home care package, and sometimes to the full level of level 4, VHC only to level 2 usually. What will happen in the new program in terms of the interplay between DVA support and the home care support?
I don't know about the interaction between DVA and home care support, but Ms. Atkinson? Yeah. We can find out and come back to you, if that's all right.
I've got a crowd here wanting me to ask a question, yes. Thank you, David, for being here today. We can always rely on you to come and help us when we need that, so that's fantastic. I'm getting old and I'm finding life increasingly getting difficult. Before I get to need the aged care packages and the nursing homes, life is getting tough for older Canberrans. What's happening before then in terms of service? I've noticed my Coles has cut out its disability and helpline. You've got to do your grocery shopping, self and put it through the turnstiles. They're cutting out, they're letting us down. Corporates aren't providing the customer service that they need to the elderly. So we can cope at home without assistance. I wait 2 hours on the phone to get somebody to talk to me from the Commonwealth Bank so that they'll give me some interest on my money, and I've got to do that nearly every month. It's just getting tough. Can't we put it back on those profit-making organisations? Why should they be allowed to cut out their disability aisle and make me do my own groceries? I can't do it. I've got a paralysed leg. I cannot do it. I need help. But I shouldn't have to get a worker to come and take me through the paying the checkout. Surely that's Coles, job to serve me.
Yeah, I'd agree. We've heard concerns about private providers, and clearly there's a need for government to actually step in and say, these are the expectations. This is what you will do. And I think when it comes to corporate Australia, I certainly see, and I think we've seen in the last week or so with the Prime Minister's Qantas sort of fiasco, this incredibly cosy relationship between corporate Australia and the people who should be regulating them. And it's no surprise that we have an economy that is dominated by incredibly concentrated sectors with a lack of competition. The duopoly in supermarkets, the duopoly in airlines, the banks, some of the most profitable banks in the world. I think last year, between them, they made almost $30 billion profit. And at the same time, offshoring call centres, doing all these things. So, yeah, so...
We want to stay in our community. We can do it if there is a community and that the corporates step up and give us the service that we're paying for.
No, I agree. And I think, there's a need to actually put an expectation on these big companies for the kind of services that they're going to provide. And particularly as we see more and more things being automated, that lack of human sort of facing customer service, and you're just talking to a machine or, heaven forbid, an artificial intelligence that's now making decisions behind the scenes. So I think it's a big area that the Parliament needs to step up on.
I was about to suggest one more question, but I think there's so many one more questions that we could do that we could be here all afternoon. I apologise if I missed anybody, but perhaps if we wrap up and head to afternoon tea.
Sure.
Does that?
Thank you again for your time this afternoon. I know that there's a lot in there, and there'll be lots of other questions. Please, if you do have time to hang around, find someone in a Team Pocock t-shirt, ask questions. We'll do our best to get back to you. And if you have any concerns over the next little while this bill, specifically on the bill, please get in touch with my office. And then just generally, if you see things that you think I'm not doing well or you don't like, please get in touch too. Always looking to try and improve how I represent people in the ACT. But thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And if we can just give Miss Julie Atkinson a round of applause for taking time out. Huh? Okay, great. Please help yourself to tea and coffee and biscuits.